So thank you all, yes, for coming and for showing interest in applying for the Education Incubator. So as mentioned, the project's going to, the presentation will cover a number of aspects relating to the application process for an incubator project. We have some current project fellows here as well who are going to be with us for the entire session, so you can ask them for their experience in the current year as well. And we have some kind of general feedback that we've collected and can go through. A quick bit about the incubator. The incubator was set up in 2017 to facilitate academic-led, innovative and effective education practice in line with the strategic needs of education at Exeter. It began with a handful of projects in 2017 and 18. I think it was 12. And it's grown year on year with over 30 projects running in 2020 to 21, engaging thousands of staff and students across Exeter on a number of different topics. To learn more about these previous projects, we have them on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat once we get to the Q&A section. I guess just a little bit more about us as well. We seek to facilitate wider engagement with innovative and evidence-based educational practice through academic-led communities of practice and events, as Sarah mentioned, to provide a means for academics to undertake senior and principal fellow level activity to support working for their Higher Education Academy fellowships, for external awards and for just general recognition of educational excellence, and also to raise the profile of educational innovation and excellence at Exeter through supporting dissemination of projects and their findings both within and beyond the university. So the 2021-22 application cycle represents the 5th iteration of incubator projects, and we're asking applicants to focus their ideas around the following 3 themes: so globally engaged learning, racial equality and inclusion, and integrating online and on campus for a transformative education. And these 3 themes have been chosen to reflect the changing context of higher education and society more widely, and to present areas of kind of real opportunity, innovation and growth for staff to develop their ideas in. We will discuss these more, I guess, in the Q&A session and later on in the presentation. But before we do that, it would be great, I think, for us to share with you some examples of kind of current and previous projects to highlight both the kind of pedagogical innovations that they create, but also the impact that they can have in practice. So thinking about current and past projects, I've chosen some projects here from over the past year, and I just kind of want to run through them very, very quickly. And I know that 2 of the leads for these projects are sitting in the call, so I'm sure they will be throwing daggers at me if I get it slightly wrong. But with Transcultural Devon, run by Alice Farris and her team, they're working to empower students to interview and collect information from, a variety of different language speakers in the Southwest, and working to collate these kind of community voices into a joint publication. The outcome of the project is it upskills students, brilliantly with interview skills. It kind of celebrates diversity in the Southwest and draws attention to these different communities. We have the Lego Serious Play project. So Holly Henderson is in the call. She has kind of adopted the Lego Serious Play methodology to train a series of facilitators. And then these facilitators engage with students, staff and others, both inside and outside of the university, using Lego to literally build models that can solve kind of big problems and big challenges. And some of these have included working with engineering students to discuss topics around LiDAR, wellbeing services at the university, and for management development courses with the Bank of England and with other external partners. We also have a current project this year run by Layal Hakim around mathematics without the tears and fears. So Layal and her team in SEMPS have worked very closely with a group of students to develop and create new mathematical games that students and others can use to learn about mathematical proof. And so these are, we had a presentation on this, I think about 2 weeks ago, where the students actually showcased what they were doing, and it was a really kind of inspiring session to be in, to hear these students say, we were given this goal, we've kind of gone off and done it, and here's what we've done. And as someone who doesn't understand maths, a lot of it went over my head, but the bits I understood were brilliant, and they were brilliant in how they did it. So the team of students have been kind of very much empowered to be co kind of project fellows, and they've created a series of games that will be kind of piloted, tested, and evaluated, and then I think the intent is to kind of fold them back into teaching students about mathematical proof and to use these tools. And then emails going off. Sorry. The final example, just to kind of give you something slightly different, is the Decolonial Knowledge Network. So this is funded by the One in Participation team within the university, and it's a project that encompasses a large number of staff and students from across a variety of colleges. I think it's 8 colleges in all. And they come together and they work, and they've been working to develop new ways of platforming and showcasing kind of decolonized knowledge and coming up with strategies to decolonize education and pedagogy and curricula and things like that. And I think what again this project is notable for is how they've included students as well. So they've got 8 students employed in each of the different areas, and those students who again have been empowered to kind of go and create their own kind of work packages within the project. And so one of their kind of most prominent, I guess, successes to date was an In Conversation event they had a few weeks ago with Angela Davis and Ilan Pape, and to discuss kind of kind of decolonizing the curriculum and kind of the world as it is at the moment. And it was attended by hundreds of people on the night, and the last time I checked, it was live streamed by a couple of thousand people, kind of that's come from this project and been very much led by students. So the purpose, I guess, of telling you about these projects is to highlight the wide scope that's available for you to pursue when developing innovations. We've gone from interviewing kind of diverse communities to Lego Serious Play to creating games for mathematical proof purposes to creating a network of kind of like-minded people to come together and create change. And the variety is such an interesting mix within the incubator, but hopefully it shows you that you have the opportunities to really go for it in terms of what your plans are. So one of the key things, I guess, as well to mention is a previous project from the incubator called Inventor won a Times Higher Education Award, I think about 3 months ago. I think it was November, for digital and tech innovation. And I guess the purpose of sharing this is to show you that a number of our projects, the hope and the aim is that a number of projects are developed into resources and techniques that are then used both in the university and beyond. And Inventor is a great example of how transformational a project can be, and it would have started in the same way that yours is probably being considered at the moment, just an idea that grows and grows and becomes more kind of innovative, I guess, as it goes. So very quickly, as I've mentioned, we're going to hear more from current fellows in the Q&A session as we go, but we've also spoken to some previous fellows and asked them to reflect on their experiences of running a project as well, just to let you know what it's like to work with us. So a number of fellows from last year's projects in particular have said that working on their projects in 2019 to 2020 prepared them to teach during COVID times and around COVID restrictions, because purely kind of serendipitously their projects were around online learning or whatever it was, but the incubator gave them the space to hone that new practice that's been used in a context that none of us expected. In terms of the events, we've had some lovely feedback saying that the events that we run throughout the year around the Incubator Cafe and Dartington Writing Retreat provide kind of food for thought and a space again for where fellows can test their ideas and find good practice and kind of be stimulated by other fellows. I was going to say fellow fellows, but that wouldn't work. We also have network meetings. So we had some of our network meetings last week where we bring together kind of different groups of fellows with kind of similar kind of overall project themes. And the feedback we get from those is that people feel really re-energized throughout the year, when especially in this year when people are very tired and sometimes focus can shift slightly, and it gives them a chance to kind of really refocus in on what their projects are and what the outcomes will be. And I think the nicest feedback we had was from someone who said on being a fellow, it's given me a broader outlook on education, a greater knowledge of how the university works, and a different outlook on my own career development. So hopefully that shows you the kind of the personal benefits you can get from running projects as well. So to get onto the application aspects, this year we're encouraging applicants to develop projects using design thinking principles, which is what the session on Thursday is going to focus on. And these are reflected in the application process that we've designed, and it's broadly comprised of the 3 stages you can see on the screen. So we've created a repository of reports, which is the picture actually on the right of the screen, and documents on our webpage that you can use to identify kind of current challenges and problems at the university that you can then kind of use your project to try and address. And we really kind of emphasized utilizing these documents. You know, we thought we would make this as simple as possible and go, you know, the data is in here, the data for what you need will be in these documents. We would then recommend that you spend time kind of obviously reading these documents, but also really thinking about, okay, what else exists? Are there existing initiatives? Are there gaps that we can fill? And a big part of that process is collaborating with others, both in terms of staff and students who can help you shape the vision and the aim of your project. We'll come on to kind of student engagement later on, but I know that, you know, in Layao's project especially, that the role that the students have played has kind of been transformational in a lot of ways. And I think it's an asset that projects in the incubator need to utilize more and can do great work with. And so finally as well, the deadline for the project applications is April 1st, and we would recommend submitting slightly earlier so that your head of department or equivalent can sign your project application email. So you'll have a confirmation that's sent to you when you complete the form that you will need to forward on to them for them to then sign off and send back to us, so that they're aware that you've applied and they're happy to sign off on the time that you've asked for and various other aspects of that. So just be aware that without this sign off, your project will not be considered in the kind of the judging phase of the project application. So very, very important to get that sign off. So I guess onto the kind of the actual application itself, and probably the most one of the most important things is what can be funded. You know, so it's 1 year of resource that can be used to backfill teaching or administrative duties, up to 1 day a week maximum for incubator fellows. A grade F teaching replacement with on costs, and this needs to be entered into your budget on a pro rata basis. Building this budget can be a challenge, but it's something that we again would recommend spending time on, because it's, whilst the budget can change and it doesn't need to be set in stone, it's useful to have a really clear kind of, it's useful both for yourselves and for us to have a really clear steer of what the project will look like and almost what the phasing of the different work packages will be across the year. Again, yeah, so it says there, you know, we can fund this, but your head of department is the person who must agree it. So you need that buy-in from someone at a more senior level. You can also use the fund to request money to pay for student engagement, whether that's via the student campus partnerships or through e-claims, and also travel and conference attendance and kind of other incidental costs. Now, obviously, this year, projects that had, you know, travel and conference attendance have tended not to use that. And for next year, we would recommend trying to plan in as best you can, but with the understanding that we understand that it may have to change. And that, you know, we have some projects this year that had money in for conferencing that have since used it for completely different things related to their project, because it would be just, you know, a waste of time if we said you can't spend that money because you can't go to the conferences. So an important part of these projects is that they last, well, the budget themselves, the budget lasts from between the 1st of August 2021 to the 31st of July 2022, and the wiggle room around that is not very much. So really plan your project spend to fall within those two timeframes. Projects can extend past that if they need to in terms of final outcomes, but no money can be spent after the 31st of July, and it needs to be accounted for by then. So just bear that in mind when you're writing your projects. I've had a few questions on this, and it's something that Sarah and I have kind of spoken about a few times. We haven't set a maximum amount of what we would say budget should be per project, because I think the feeling is if we say, oh, the maximum is 10,000, then people will tend to gravitate towards that figure. We can talk more about that with projects as they get developed, and we're happy to talk about that in the Q&A as well. But we kind of have a reticence to put a very clear figure on, you know, what the maximum would be. But yeah, we can talk about that slightly more later on. So in terms of the student engagement aspect, I've already alluded to this. So as part of our ongoing commitment to engage with students at all stages of the project, we recommend working with them as co-researchers, both in the planning stage of applications, but also, you know, through the delivery stage and sometimes as well in the evaluation stage. So the cost of working with students as co-researchers, as I mentioned, can be part of the funding request, but they can play, you know, the role, the invaluable roles that they can play, you know, in terms of they can be informants who can support and test what you're doing, you know, your project developments, and they can also kind of work in bespoke roles alongside you, whether that's, you know, we in our Mindful Classics project, we have students working on developing social media so that actually more students can know to engage with the project. Right through to what I've mentioned in layouts as well, where they're actually designing the games themselves and creating the code. The costs associated with this are approximately $10.65 per hour. If you plan to use that, from memory, it went up last year after the application period, but we will let you know how that changes. I think it went from $10.42 to $10.65, but just build in that it's $10.65 per hour, and then we can figure that out if it changes. There's a £100 Student Campus Partners recruitment fee as well for the roles that you put out. So please ensure that you include that in with your budget allocations as well. And I guess the last thing on this is, you know, a big part of working with students in these capacities is that you have the opportunity to encourage them to work with you as co-authors on your project outcomes. You know, this idea of collaborative authorship, you know, including journal articles, blogs, and other outputs, and it's a great opportunity for students to learn more about this aspect of authorship and intellectual property. So it's well worth doing, and something I'm sure we can come back to. In terms of the project plan itself, so a key aspect, you know, we've mentioned around students and around kind of project costs and travel costs as well. But the three aspects will those three aspects will be built into your overall project plan, which is what the form itself asks for. So we generally, with projects, ask them to create a timeline across the year for the year of the project, and try to include estimated costs to each of these. So both you know and we know how your budget will be sequenced, because I think what can tend to happen if we don't do that is say you get £10,000 for a project, but you're not going to spend, you know, if you don't spend any of it until term 2, because that's the way your project is sequenced, or you only spend £500, there becomes a challenge where people go, well, hang on, this isn't spending. Is the project running? What's the output? So really try to think what's your phasing across the year. And again, that's something that when you put it into your application, that's not set in stone. We appreciate that can change, but it's just a way that we can start to build in kind of project milestones throughout the year to measure progress. I've written ethics approval there as well. That's something that, you know, we can talk more about in the Q&A, but the ethics approval process for projects, it can take more time than you plan it to. So it's again, really think about, you know, does your project need ethics approval? And if yes, what's the most effective and quickest way of getting that? And again, Huri, I know you can speak in the Q&A about your experience of having to go through that process a couple of times. So ethics approval is a really key part of your project plan when considering that phasing process. So one of the most important part of the applications that will be considered by the panel are the impacts and the outputs. And we would recommend that projects try to have as tangible a set of impacts and outputs as possible, and that these are built into the different aspects of both your application form and your project plan. So for those of you who've looked at the questions, or if you haven't, look at them afterwards, and you'll see that there are kind of very clear gaps in how it's being created for you to put these, you know, these impacts in. Sorry, and some of these include, the development of learning and assessment resources for use in modules and beyond, training for colleagues, toolkits and various things like that. Another example of an output is a kind of a proof of concept or the development of a work stream, the creation of a community of learning or a community of inquiry, interactive virtual reality environments. We've had some great success with those sorts of things in previous years. And then also you can think about kind of how these are disseminated as well. So, whether it's through the academic practice network, creating workshops for stakeholders, education conference at the university, videos and kind of other media. So one thing we found this year is we're running projects that are student-led as well. We have student-led anti-racism projects, and as the project manager in the incubator, it's really interesting to see the difference when we speak to the students about how they're going to tell other stakeholders and how staff are going to tell other stakeholders. And I think that there is definitely a benefit there of working with students, because they understand social media a hell of a lot better than I do. And I'm probably not much older than them, and yet they're streets ahead. In terms of external dissemination, obviously you have conferences. We will, and I'll mention this again later, we will, as part of doing projects, we ask that all project leads submit 2 blogs over the year that go onto our WordPress. There's a variety of papers that you can do as well. So we've got their co-written with students, which is always something that gets great readership. If I look at the WordPress blog this year, those papers that are either, those blogs that are either written with students or very clearly written by students on their own, they tend to get the best readership, because I think those students actually have huge networks of interested people and amongst their peers who want to be involved in the incubator. And one of the more common things is, I didn't know this existed, I wish it did beforehand, because I would have got involved earlier. And finally, Twitter as well. So most of you, I'm sure, follow us on Twitter. If you don't, we can give you that at the end, so you can follow us and see what we post. But we've really tried this year to be more expansive in how we do our Twitter, supporting projects and providing a platform, for you to again, to showcase your work. Project evaluation is the last point on that slide. So, impacts and outcomes. The impacts and outcomes that your project will create, they're a large part of the criteria on which the panel who will be deciding the projects will decide who will be funded and who won't. But a key part of that also is how you plan to evaluate your project and how you plan to evaluate the impact. So again, please spend time, really thinking about what's the legacy of your project beyond July 2022, and how will its impact extend beyond that, both for the project itself, but also how can the incubator support that. So yeah, I guess kind of advice would be, before completing your application, really just assess how you will measure that progress across the year, and really put some thought into the perspective of different stakeholders, and think about the kind of information gathering methods that you can include in your application, whether that's questionnaires, interviews, feedback forms, focus groups, diaries. There's a huge number of ways of getting that evaluation and that feedback. So we are nearly at past, so I'm just going to get through this so we have time for the Q&A. The application criteria, projects themselves will be judged on the following 7 criteria: their potential to improve student learning, their innovative approach, the extent of meaningful student involvement, their fit within the incubator themes and the themes of the university education strategy, whether they identify clear impacts and outcomes, as we've just discussed, the likelihood of being delivered to time and budget, and their potential to impact practice across the university. These criteria will go up with other things onto our website after this, so please don't feel like you frantically need to write those down. They will be up there on the main application page, so that you can refer back to them as you go. So in terms of how the incubator can support you, if you're successful in your application, we will draw up a memorandum of understanding with you that will discuss the amount of funding your project has received, but also the kind of expectations we share for the year, and to highlight some of the things that we can offer. These include one-to-one meetings. I've alluded to the network meetings that we hold throughout the year that bring different projects together. You'll have kind of dedicated project support, which can be negotiated at different levels, and at the moment that will primarily be myself that you'll be dealing with on that. and I know that I work with Huri, Leal, and Holly quite closely on their projects, and that's great to have that understanding from an incubator point of view. I've mentioned social media platforms as well, so we've kind of overhauled our WordPress, and we're still working on that. And in terms of how we use our website and LinkedIn and Twitter, we're always happy to support, and showcase what you're doing. We will ask that fellows and projects complete monthly feedback forms. These are very kind of light touch Google forms, just to let us know how it's going. I've mentioned the 2 blog posts. We'll have a milestones meeting about 6 months into the project, where we will kind of look at how it's going and kind of reflect on the first 6 months. These meetings are very important because the way that the funding works is that half the funding is released at the start of the project and half the funding is released at that 6-month point. So you have to kind of reach your milestones so that money isn't just kind of sitting there. We've had instances in previous years where projects will be massively underspending and another project will be begging us for money, but we don't know that the first project isn't going to spend it towards the end of the year. So it's a way of measuring progress and making sure that everyone stays on track. And the last 2 things as well are an e-Dartington event. So we actually had a meeting about that this morning to discuss what our writing retreat will look like this year, and kind of continuing it in its e-form. And the Incubator Cafe, which is where we will ask all project fellows to present on their projects, whether they're at the beginning of the process or at the end. So if you're successful in this round, you will be presenting in 2021 about your hopes and aspirations for the year, and in 2022 on your outcomes for the year as well. So very quickly, next steps. A kind of a key aspect of successful applications and successful projects are those that engage with interdisciplinary groups of both colleagues and students across the university. And we would recommend spending time thinking about your wider project teams and the kind of, we've seen so many kind of serendipitous connections that occur when you speak to different people, and these add such tremendous value to applications and lead to things that you would never have thought of in the first place. So in terms of your next steps, research the issues and how they can be resolved on our website, reach out to both colleagues and students and listen to them and kind of inquire to their knowledge. Write your application and spend time reflecting on it and really kind of trying to kind of parse out details within it, pass out the words almost so that what you're trying to show is clear to the panel, and apply by April the 1st, 2021. So last slide. So what now? To start on the application process, check the website. We have posted links to previous projects and previous successful applications. The applications are being uploaded as we speak, so they'll be there from later on this afternoon. Look on our Twitter, our LinkedIn, and our WordPress. And these resources are crucial in helping you understand how projects are started and how they develop throughout the year, and you can use this to make your own application successful. And if you have any further questions, you can obviously ask us now, but for anyone who's watching the recording of this, you can email us at the Education Incubator email there. So thank you all for listening. I'm 3 minutes over, which is not ideal, but I'll pass over to Sarah to open up the Q&A after this.
Well, I'm just going to ask Leal and Holly to say something briefly, but thank you for all of that information, Tom. From my point, there was just one thing that I wanted to clarify. And again, this is partly because it's a recording. So the 6-month review is kind of a 6-month review, but how it actually works is you get half of the money at the front, and we agree in that memorandum of understanding a midpoint. So it's actually about outputs rather than time. When you reach that midpoint, you get the second half of your money. You might reach that a month into your project. You might reach it 8 months into your project. All of that is fine until we get to the 9-month point. If you've not delivered half of your project by the time we've had 9 months, we will say that we are not going to release the rest of the money, because we don't believe at that point you are going to complete the full kind of more than half of a project in 3 months. We can clarify that kind of with projects, but I just wanted to make it's a little bit detailed, but just because it's being recorded, I think that's worth clarifying. No, it's just you had a lot to get through.